they are expecting much more tonight if indeed the land war does start, Molly.
Peter, you may not have this information, but I'll ask the question anyway. We're getting reports that Iraqi troops are committing terrible atrocities against Kuwaiti citizens in Kuwait City. Can you comment on that?
The only information we have, Molly, is from what I've been hearing over CNN and other international broadcasts. We have no information, not only on that, but anything from Kuwait. We have no information on that at all.
Do you feel that tonight people are especially fearful also in light of this attack 15 minutes before that Washington deadline? Do you feel a distinct increase in the fear factor in Baghdad?
Well, I'm just being handed by our producer, Vito Maggiola, a statement that has been translated from Baghdad radio officially. Let me read it to you. Iraqi officials concerned are seriously considering the establishment of a national democratic government in Kuwait if the U.S. and its allies refuse to accept the Soviet initiative, according to sources close to the Revolution Command Council. A dispatch by the Iraqi news agency today said that the said government would be established in cooperation with the religious and national forces which are opposed to imperialism and foreign domination. So that seems to be like a political move by Iraq coming just a few minutes before the ultimatum expires, Molly.
Peter, translate that a little bit for us. Who and what would be put into Kuwait?
Well, this is a totally new twist in the story to me, Molly. At first reading, I would say that they're suggesting they're establishing some kind of government that would, in fact, be fighting for the existence of an independent Kuwait, of a country that would be no longer the 19th province of Kuwait, but actually an independent country, and that their forces would be in effect assisting them. That's the impression I got. So they're trying to form a government down there, which they would then fight for. That's my first reading at this point, Molly.
You told us earlier today that Saddam Hussein had been meeting with Iraq's political leaders, members of the Ba'ath Party, members of parliament. Do you think, at least can you speculate, perhaps this statement came out of those meetings?
I think there is no doubt about it that this came out of the meeting. The first indication of their meeting came at 6:15 tonight on Baghdad radio. This is the first development from that. So this is obviously one of the matters that were being considered. They were talking about discussing the political situation. Now, Saddam Hussein is known as a man who doesn't like ultimatums, and this is his response. It seems to be he's trying to suggest he's upping the ante in effect by suggesting that he will be fighting in Iraq for an independent Kuwaiti, fighting in Kuwait, I'm sorry, for an independent Kuwaiti government. That would be my initial reading of this, Molly.
You've talked to the people of Baghdad and the people of Iraq. Are they, in your view, willing to accept this and then all of a sudden see themselves fighting in a new way for a new government in Kuwait? Rather than having Iraq annex that country, as Saddam Hussein has said all along he wanted to do?
Yeah, before I answer that question, Molly, I'll point out that the bombing has resumed over the quadrant of the horizon. I can see the 90 degrees or so. There has been anti-aircraft fire and bombing in that particular area. People of Iraq we meet, they are not the military people. They are either government officials here at the hotel, an occasional a senior government individual, or we meet businessmen, people in buses, passers-by. They're talking of peace. Thursday of the week before last, they were excited by what seemed to be an offer of an unconditional withdrawal from Kuwait by the Iraqi government. They fired guns in the air, as you remember those vivid pictures. Since then, it has been easy to find people. Most people we talk to say they want peace. But these people aren't on the front lines. They haven't got the guns. They aren't responding to the orders from the government that is in command. So they are not factors at this point, Molly. What is the real factor are the anti-aircraft man firing these attacking bombers and the troops in the front line in Kuwait, Molly.
All right, CNN's Peter Arnett, he's live in Baghdad. We're going to check back in with him as the bombardment over Baghdad continues tonight, and we'll be back with that. We'll go to Dave Michaels.
Folks in Fayetteville, North Carolina are watching the approaching deadline as closely as everyone else around the world. CNN's Jeff Flock is in Fayetteville. Jeff, what are they thinking there?
Dave, we've been standing by with the military wives here all week as they have been standing by and waiting. And, of course, we've been watching You folks have been riveted here to this coverage from Baghdad. Donna Pointer, what goes through your mind as you see this on the monitor as we've watched it here?
It's good to see that they're continuing and to show Baghdad that we mean business. As far as I'm concerned, they ought to keep going and not let up at all.
Do you have any reason to be optimistic about peace?
None at all. It's just another Hussein ploy to buy time, I think, and we need to go in and show them what we're made of and that we mean business.
What about your sons here, your twin sons? When you watch what you see up on the monitor up there, what goes through your mind?
Well, the bombing, I think it's cool, and I think we should keep it up. Maybe he'll understand that we're not joking around.
Yeah. Does it scare you at all to see that scene that we're seeing there on that screen up on the monitor there?
Sometimes it does.
What do you think about your dad?
I know that if he gets up in his Apache, that when the ground force goes in, if he's not out of there, when the ground force goes in, they probably will get him.
Yeah, Don, does that concern you? Obviously, he's an Apache helicopter pilot. In a ground war, he's a key player. What about that?
He's a good pilot. He's been trained well, and I have all the confidence in the world in him. They'll do fantastic.
You're as prepared as you can be for a ground offensive.
As prepared as I can be. Part of me is fearful, obviously, but I know he's a good pilot, and like I said, he's been trained well, and they were just waiting for their turn to show the U.S. what the Apaches are made of.
Donna, good luck, and thank you very much. I think we've got time maybe to talk to a few more. Bruce, come on around if you can. This is Yvonne McGuire and her daughter, Brittany. Your husband is also right there. Is he ready, and are you ready?
He's ready. I'm ready. I'm ready to get this over with. I want him to come home.
We are here at, we should point out, at this Desert Storm Message Center here at this Cross Creek Mall here in Fayetteville, North Carolina. You come here to watch developments. You watch what's up on the screen now. You see what's going on in Baghdad. How does it make you feel?
Well, you try not to watch a whole lot of television because it gets kind of depressing. But people come in and out every day, and you get to hear their viewpoints on everything. And it helps you a lot. It really helps military wives a lot.
Okay. Yvonne, thank you very much. Brittany, thank you. We're going to move on if we can. Bruce, follow me around if you can. We've got a few more wives standing by over here, a couple of them with very young children who have also been watching our coverage, watching for developments. Chandra Wright, your husband is there. His son is here, and you're here. You told me earlier you are ready, and you hope that Iraq doesn't pull out. Why is that?
Because I don't want my husband over there 6 months from now again. And it would just be better to go ahead and get him out now than wait.
That makes sense. All right, Deanna, thank you. That's all we have time for here at the moment. We're going to come back and talk to some more wives later. For now, I'm Jeff Flock, CNN, reporting live from Fayetteville, North Carolina.
We're going live right now to Richard Roth, standing by in Tel Aviv. Richard.
Yes, Dave, sirens are going off right now. It just began just about a minute ago, and we believe sirens are going off here in Tel Aviv and in other cities. And we're being told by Israeli radio that it is due to a missile attack. We have no information yet what kind of attack or the number of missiles. If it indeed is a missile attack, it would be the 16th time Iraq has struck at Israel. Many people in the Jewish state who do have cable access were watching the live pictures of the attack in Baghdad when the sirens have gone off now. People in Israel are advised to go to sealed rooms and to put on their gas mask. All the attacks so far, of course, have been conventional. And they also have been, the authorities have been able to get better advance notice if there is a launch. So the sirens go off, and then there's a couple of minutes usually before we find out what happens. Richard Roth, CNN, reporting live from Tel Aviv.
Our coverage of the war in the Gulf will continue right after this.
Today, many of the Fortune 500's heaviest hitters will leave town on business. They'll be carrying SkyTel's nationwide pages with voicemail, which means they'll get information sooner and help customers faster. Which is how the heavy hitters get to be heavy hitters. SkyTel, that great communication system in the sky for For more information, call 1-800-456-all-threes.
Remember the last time you microwaved chicken with breadcrumbs? Introducing French's microwave mixes. They're made just for your microwave to seal in the juices better than breadcrumbs, so you make tender, juicy chicken in delicious flavors like Italian Parmesan. One taste and you'll bounce the rubber chicken forever. New French's microwave mixes, the best way to microwave chicken.
Annie, they said, let's talk about Pop Secret Light. Guys, I said, I wanted to save this conversation for my next cocktail party, but hey, I love this stuff. Then they tell me about this taste test where real people who eat popcorn picked Pop Secret Light as the best tasting light popcorn. Annie, they said, this is good news. I said, this is good popcorn.
Pop Secret Light. Perfect popcorn is our passion.
There are some things you just can't get enough of.
3M salutes the Olympic athletes who found a better way. Whose ideas were so original, there's no going back. That same innovative thinking helped us invent Post-it brand notes. And the way you leave messages has never been the same. 3M, innovation working for you.
As we watch the continuing bombardment in Baghdad and listen to the air raid sirens going off at this moment in Tel Aviv, we're going to go to CNN's Wolf Blitzer. He's standing by live at the Pentagon now. Wolf?
Molly, here at the Pentagon, there's a sense of resignation that a ground war could begin literally at any moment after this noon deadline. There's certainly no indication that it will begin at 12:01, but that is possible. One military officer said to me only a few moments ago, quote, "How long can you hold back a bowstring?" Clearly indicating that the U.S. and allied ground forces are poised, ready to go at virtually any moment. There is no indication by all accounts here that the Iraqis are making any signs preparing for a withdrawal. In fact, all of the indications are that the Iraqis are standing pat. They are dug in, prepared to take on any allied ground assault. There is a sense that the fighting at times when it comes down to a ground war could be very fierce, especially against the elite Republican Guard. But at the same time, among senior military planners here, there's also a sense that the frontline Iraqi troops, the lesser trained Iraqi troops, are perhaps waiting for this ground war to begin and are more inclined to surrender and become prisoners of war. Indeed, the Allies are making huge preparations to take in what they expect will be tens of thousands of Iraqi POWs. So one estimate is that they have already made preparations for 100,000 prisoners of war. That could go up depending on the course of the war. No one knows for sure how this battlefield has been prepared. U.S. and other allied sources insist that the pounding by the airstrikes over these past 5.5 weeks have been very effective, very intense. But General Colin Powell and Defense Secretary Dick Cheney have made it clear that they're not expecting any simple mopping up operation. They're expecting a full-scale war. They are prepared for it. There are thousands of fast-moving U.S. tanks and armored vehicles poised to go literally at any moment. Wolf Blitzer, CNN, reporting live from the Pentagon.
Thanks for that, Wolf.
Well, we are literally only moments away from the deadline for Iraq to pull out of Kuwait, only moments away from noon Eastern Time. Our coverage of the war in the Gulf will continue after this local break.
Today, many of the Fortune 500's heaviest hitters will leave town on business. They'll be carrying SkyTel's nationwide pages with voicemail, which means they'll get information sooner and help customers faster. Which is how the heavy hitters get to be heavy hitters. SkyTel, that great communication system in the sky. For more.
Usually, when I'm at the Miami Arena, I have a basketball in my hands. But today, since the Miami Arena is so quiet, I get to do my favorite thing, read. To me, reading a book is as exciting as driving down full court and making that score. Just like basketball, books are full of adventure and unexpected twists and turns. Every time I finish reading a book, I score points for myself. You will too. Count on reading.
Need money now? Just bring in your jewelry to Morning Stars in downtown Hollywood. Morning Stars gives loans of any size with the lowest monthly charges using your jewelry as collateral. Want a good buy on jewelry? Then come on down to Morning Stars. Buy elegant jewelry at below wholesale prices or get a low-cost loan on your jewelry. Complete jewelry and watch repair done on the premise. State licensed appraisers doing appraisals accepted by major insurance companies while you wait. Morning Stars, 2000 Hollywood Boulevard.
There are people out there who need help, but don't have anyone with the right skills and knowledge.
According to the White House clock, Iraq's time has run out. I'm Dave Michaels.
I'm Molly McCoy. The UN Security Council has been in session in this last hour before the deadline did run out. CNN's Charles Feldman is standing by live there now. Charles, what do you know?
Well, here's what we are being told, and we're going to be very careful in reporting this, understandably, I believe. We are hearing from representatives of two different diplomatic missions here at the UN that at the Security Council meeting, the Security Council was informed that the Iraqi foreign minister has responded positively, in a positive manner, to the U.S. statement. The word we're being told is being used is statement as opposed to the U.S. noon ultimatum. We are also being told that the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, that's Ambassador Pickering, has asked for a clarification. So again, let me repeat what it is we are hearing. We are hearing from representatives of two different missions to the United Nations that the Security Council, which is meeting now, the 15-member Security Council, has been informed that the Iraqi foreign minister has responded in a positive manner to the U.S. statement. The word again being statement, the word that presumably Ambassador Pickering is trying to have clarified. We know no more about this. We don't know if they're referring to the ultimatum, the president's ultimatum, President Bush's ultimatum of noon, or if there's some other American statement that we do not know about as of yet. This is all we know now from the UN, and as we learn more, we, of course, will report it to you. Molly?
Charles, I realize that details are very sketchy, and you in no way have a transcript of the meeting that has gone on, but do you know or have you heard that there's been any mention of the atrocities that are apparently taking place in Kuwait?
Well, we haven't heard if that has been discussed yet at the Security Council. And certainly before the Security Council began, as the ambassadors were filing in, the ambassador from Kuwait did come in and stop to talk to reporters as he normally does, and he did talk about the alleged rounding up of Kuwaiti citizens by Iraqis, but offered no further proof of this. And again, let me just emphasize what we're reporting earlier about what we're hearing from these two representatives of diplomatic missions. One has to understand that obviously with the deadline now, I think, passed by my watch, things are somewhat confusing. Everybody is trying to figure out what language is being used. Charles Feldman, CNN, reporting live from the United Nations.
All right, just minutes ago, just as the clock was counting down to the White House deadline, the skies over Baghdad lit up with live pictures. These pictures are live out of Baghdad right now as the Allied forces continue an attack on the capital of Iraq, Baghdad. A lot of secondary explosions from military targets obviously being hit. Anti-aircraft fire was very prevalent just minutes ago, so we'll continue to monitor these live pictures out of Baghdad during this attack. We now go to White House. Correspondent Frank Sesno is standing by in Washington. Frank.
Dave, the White House has decided to let the noon deadline pass without comment. White House spokesman Marlin Fitzwater saying only that, quote, "We are monitoring the situation. We have nothing to report." Here at the White House, National Security Advisor Brent Scowcroft is in his office. President Bush is at Camp David along with Secretary of State James Baker. They are monitoring the situation very carefully at Camp David as well. All morning long, however, senior administration officials have been telling us that they did not expect very much at the United Nations. They have been saying they did not expect Iraq to accept the terms of the U.S. ultimatum. There is, of course, no specific response to what we heard from Charles Feldman just a few moments ago. And although we are told that perhaps later in the afternoon, spokesman Fitzwater will have something to say. President Bush yesterday, in laying out the ultimatum, said there were two things that he wanted to see if, in fact, this withdrawal by Iraq was going to take place and be substantiated. One was a clear comment, a clear commitment to do it from Iraq, from the senior-most levels there, communicated to the United Nations, and two was physical evidence of a withdrawal taking place from Kuwait. According to Pentagon and White House officials, with whom CNN has been in touch throughout the morning, there has been no indication of any imminent, actual, or planned Iraqi withdrawal from Kuwait. So at least one of the president's conditions appears not to have been met. That being said, a number of officials say that for political reasons that are quite understandable, the United States will have to watch this situation very carefully. Though the deadline was etched in stone rhetorically, it certainly was not as a matter of fact. And at least one senior official said here this morning that he expected a fair amount of time would elapse before this campaign entered its next and potentially costliest phase, the ground campaign. Frank Sesno, CNN, reporting live from the White House.
Frank, what can you tell us about reports of alleged atrocities by Iraqis in Kuwait?
Dave, it's a question we have put throughout the morning since it was first raised in the Riyadh briefing earlier to a variety of officials here at the White House. There are not a great many specifics. Officials say that these are reports that are coming out via the Kuwaiti resistance. They believe them to be true, but at this time there is no specific confirmation of the event or the series of alleged events or the magnitude of these atrocities. Dave?
All right, Frank Sesno reporting to us live from the White House. Molly.
The bombs continue to fall over Baghdad tonight. We're going to take you back live to Baghdad now, and CNN's Peter Arnett is standing by there live. Peter, any further clarification on the Iraqi government proposal to set up a new government in Kuwait?
No further clarification at this point. I'd like to point out that right as the ultimatum ended, right on the button, there was a huge explosion relatively near the hotel. It shook our camera, shook the hotel windows. We're outside in the garden of the hotel. It sounded like a cruise missile. From 7:30 this evening, that's about 40 minutes ago, the raid started here. It's going on even now in another quadrant of the city. So this is a relatively not unusual occurrence. Every night since the air war started 4.5 weeks ago, there has been bombing. But I think we find it interesting that it's particularly heavy at this particular hour on this particular occasion. We have not been able to get clarification on the governing body of Iraq, the Revolutionary Command Council's statement over Baghdad radio that it was considering the establishment of what it called a national democratic government in Kuwait if the U.S. and its allies refused to accept the Soviet initiative. This seems to be to us a defiant move, a defiant political move to defy the ultimatum, and it would suggest that Iraq will try and be saying that it is supporting this new government, I presume, but we're still waiting for a better reading on that, Molly.
All right, Peter Arnett reporting live from Baghdad for us. We're going back to the United Nations in New York now, and CNN's Charles Feldman. Charles, what more do you have for us?
Okay, what we have now is yet a third mission here at the UN reporting that what they are hearing is the following. And let me again be very careful in what I say here. We are hearing from 3 different missions to the UN that now with the deadline having passed, that the Soviet Union has, we are told, informed the Security Council, the 15-member Security Council, that Iraq's foreign minister has responded in a positive manner to the U.S. statement. Now, I emphasize the word statement because apparently the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, Pickering, has asked, we are told, for clarification because there is some confusion, and understandably so, about whether they are responding to President Bush's ultimatum that they begin the pullout from Kuwait at noon, which of course has now passed in the Eastern time, or to some other U.S. statement. So again, let me recap what we are hearing. We are hearing from 3 different missions to the United Nations here that as the Security Council is meeting, the 15-member Security Council, the Soviet Union, we are told, is telling the Security Council that the Iraqi foreign minister has responded in a positive manner to an American statement of some sort. Whether it is the ultimatum that they begin the pullout at noon, we do not know. Clarification is apparently being asked for. We will pass on any information, of course, as soon as we learn it. Charles Feldman, CNN, reporting live from the United Nations.
Thank you, Charles. Minutes ago, air raid sirens were sounding over Israel. Richard Roth is in Tel Aviv. Richard, what can you tell us?
About 20 minutes ago, a missile was fired by Iraq at Israel. Sirens went off in Tel Aviv and all across the country, everyone into the sealed rooms again, as is the custom. And the missile, we are told, came down somewhere in central Israel. This is what we believe is either the missile or debris from the missile coming down. It was visible by thousands, and it was early in the evening here in Israel. A lot of people were still out. People were out at the beach all day. People here think that Saddam Hussein should be done away with. They would like to see the U.S. continue the war effort. And this missile, if it is the last one by Iraq, came about an hour before this deadline. And it's the 16th missile attack on Israel. Areas of the country that have been given the all clear, the north and the south. The central part, which includes Tel Aviv, has not been given the all clear. Everyone has been advised to stay in sealed rooms, even though there are many people still out on the road. We do not know yet if this missile carried a conventional or chemical warhead. This is Richard Roth, CNN, reporting live from Tel Aviv.
Thank you, Richard. While our live coverage of the war in the Gulf continues, we'll hear from World Affairs correspondent Ralph Begleiter right after this.
Just flakes, huh? A little old-fashioned, don't you think? Too simple. I mean, I know you're going for that good old days thing, but all this makes me think of is the Depression. Now, wait a minute. This doesn't taste old-fashioned. It's good. I like this simple. I like it a lot.
Kellogg's Corn Flakes.
Kellogg's Corn Flakes? You know, they used to be a cereal.
Taste them again for the first time.
If I buy an extended Safari XT from GMC Truck, can I take it to work every day?
Definitely.
What about my carpool?
Absolutely.
Can we take it on vacation?
Of course.
With all of our luggage?
All of it.
Will it tow our boat?
Certainly.
It's a big boat.
Safari XT can tow up to 6,000 pounds.
Wow. But can I afford one?
Sure. Call 1-800-TRY-GMC1 for your nearest dealer. GMC Truck. It's not just a truck anymore. It's quality on the road.
The man who wrote the book on Florida grapefruit.
Aha! Grapefruit must be eaten in halves.
Has retired.
You don't just have to have it in the morning. You can peel it anytime you feel it. Slice it if you like it as a treat. You just can't beat it. Florida grapefruit anytime.
Grapefruit, fresh from Florida and Florida's Indian River.
You don't just have to have it in the morning.
In Switzerland, Ricola has been soothing sore throats and relieving coughs naturally for over 60 years. Ricola is a blend of 10 organically grown alpine herbs and natural flavors, providing pleasant-tasting natural relief. Ricola, the natural choice for soothing sore throats and relieving coughs naturally.
We are now 12 minutes and 8 seconds past the deadline that President Bush had set for the withdrawal of Iraqi troops from Kuwait. As we continue to monitor developments at the United Nations and in Washington, we want to take you back to Baghdad. And moments ago, as the bombardment over Baghdad continued tonight, Allied raids continuing, and according to our CNN's Peter Arnett, intensifying as that Bush deadline approached. A huge explosion could be seen on the horizon of Baghdad. Peter Arnett not at liberty to say what that military target might have been that the Allies were aiming at and apparently hit with their air bombardment over Baghdad tonight. Of course, the Soviet Union has been a key player in a peace proposal that was accepted by the Iraqis, rejected by Washington. We're going to go to CNN's Moscow bureau chief, Steve Hurst. He's on the phone with us now live from Moscow. Steve?
Molly, as Charles Feldman reported, the Soviets had made a last-ditch effort to head off the Allied ground offensive. As presidential spokesman said, the Kremlin had called for that extraordinary session of the UN Security Council. Vitaly Ignatenko said he hoped the council could somehow bridge the gaps between the deadline set by President Bush and the six-point peace plan Mikhail Gorbachev and Iraqi Foreign Minister Tariq Aziz reached overnight. Aziz told reporters this morning that Baghdad had accepted the Moscow-brokered proposal, but Washington had already rejected the plan before Aziz could accept on behalf of Saddam Hussein. Aziz then left the Soviet capital for Iran and the overland trip to the Iraqi capital. Once he was in the air, Ignatenko spoke and sounded philosophical, indicating that the Kremlin believed a ground offensive might now be inevitable. As the last-minute diplomacy was going on in the Soviet Foreign Ministry, Soviet soldiers, police, and their supporters were demonstrating near the Kremlin in support of law and order and the military on Red Army Day. Some placards called for the United States to end the bombing of Iraq. Others supported Iraqi leader Saddam Hussein. Ignatenko is expected to brief reporters one more time this evening, and we hope that we might hear something about the reports we're hearing from Charles Feldman that the Soviet leader, Mikhail Gorbachev, has told the UN that Tariq Aziz had accepted, in principle, the United States statement, whatever that means. We had heard from Mr. Ignatenko that Tariq Aziz and Mikhail Gorbachev had one last telephone conversation while Mr. Aziz was waiting at the airport, in which Ignatenko said Gorbachev told Aziz to weigh carefully the responsibility you are carrying back to Baghdad with you. It might have been at that moment that Tariq Aziz responded positively. We'll just have to wait and see what Mr. Ignatenko reports later tonight, Molly.
CNN's Moscow Bureau Chief Steve Hurst reporting for us live. Dave?
World Affairs correspondent Ralph Begleiter is standing by at the State Department. Ralph, what is shaking at the State Department?
Secretary of State Baker, of course, is at Camp David with President Bush. He's staying in touch here with the State Department with his number 3 man here at State, Robert Kimmett, who is following all the developments in the Gulf as well as at the United Nations. U.S. officials are very interested in those reports from the United Nations, which suggest the Soviets have indicated Iraq's willingness to accept the U.S. statement. U.S. officials are probably going to be quite wary of it, however. It is possible that Iraq may be, in effect, saying, if the United Nations asks us, if the Security Council asks us and puts those demands forward, then we, meaning the Iraqis, might be willing to accept it. But if the United States is only making those demands, then Iraq would not be willing to do so. The trouble with that, of course, is that it could take some time in debate at the United Nations to achieve that kind of a statement from the UN, and the United States is not interested right now, U.S. officials say, in engaging in a debate at the UN over the Allied demands. It remains to be seen, obviously, whether the Soviets have anything concrete to present to the UN. If they do, the United States would be very interested in seeing it, but as I say, perhaps not in spending a great deal of time debating. They say the demands for Iraq to surrender at this point are crystal clear, and if Iraq really wants to avoid the war, the one thing it could do is begin a withdrawal from Kuwait promptly. Ralph Begleiter, CNN, reporting live from the State Department.
Thanks, Ralph. We're going to take you live now to Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. CNN's Rick Salinger is standing by live there with an update. Rick?
We can tell you that the deadline has passed with no pause whatsoever in the activity. In fact, a record number of sorties flown today, 1,200, over the Kuwaiti theater of operations. And you can add to that another 100 more against the Republican Guard. In addition to that, they have some new figures to pass along showing more damage to the Iraqi forces. 1,685 Iraqi tanks, representing some 40% of those tanks in the Kuwaiti theater of operations. 1,485 artillery pieces destroyed. That is approaching 50%. Those are the numbers they had been looking for. The generals here are quite pleased with that. They wanted to destroy as much as possible before they go in on the ground. Now, more information about what is happening on the ground inside Kuwait, and it's not a pretty picture. More fires reported from oil wellheads. In fact, 190 have been spotted from the sky burning. They insist that this will not affect the ground operations, and it is providing only minimal problems from the sky. There is one other factor to tell you about also, and that is there are some new reports of alleged atrocities taking place inside Kuwait. General Richard Neal reported today that there have been executions going on the streets of Kuwait City. Of course, we've heard of this in the past, especially from Amnesty International, but now there are new stepped-up reports of this happening now. And so, on the eve of a ground war, or perhaps that is the case, we are told by senior military officials here that the Iraqis are really out of their league. They don't expect this to be easy, but they say they expect the same success as the air campaign. Reporting live from Riyadh, Rick Salinger, CNN.
All right, Rick, we're going to take you back to Tel Aviv now. CNN's Richard Roth is standing by live there now for the latest update on the latest Scud missile attack against Israel. Richard?
Yes, just minutes before that deadline, Iraq fired a Scud missile at Israel, the 16th such attack, and what is believed to be the 37th missile. The missile either broke up or landed somehow in central Israel somewhere, and officials say there were no injuries. And the warhead is believed to be conventional because everyone in the nation has been allowed out of their sealed rooms. With me right now, and shortly before this, when this incident took place, is former Israeli Prime Minister Shimon Peres. What do you think of what happened just here a couple of minutes ago?
Was another missile, more of the same. I think we feel by now much more secure and safer with the missiles. We know their shortcomings, and we know how to behave.
Do you think this was Iraq's last blast, so to speak, at Israel?
Well, I wouldn't be sure about it, but it's going toward the end. It's going to be finished soon enough.
What does Israel want the UN Security Council to do?
It's not a problem for Israel. I think it's a problem for all of us. What we would like is to be sure that the winner will not appear as the loser, and the loser will not appear as the winner. Saddam Hussein did a terrible crime, is a terrible man, is a terrible danger. It must be clear to everybody that there is an end to his aggression, to his crime. And I think the way the President of the United States has conducted this campaign, politically and military, should be saluted by all of us.
Are you urging the U.S. not to accept any kind of ceasefire deal?
I think the President has stated his conditions, and I'm sure he will stick to it. So we don't have to advise neither to add nor to reduce. It's a clear-cut situation, and the terms, I think, are in accordance with the United Nations resolution.
How does Israel feel if Saddam Hussein remains in power and he gets many of his men and a lot of his armaments out of Kuwait?
I think the Middle East will still remain a very dangerous spot. Not just Israel, and maybe not even mainly Israel, but all the other countries. The 8 Arab countries who are members of the coalition, Saudi Arabia. The man is unpredictable. He didn't do anything which is right or wise, you know. And until now, the ones who pay the price were the Iraqi people, not him. It will be a pity that they will pay and he will win. I think we have to bring, or you have to bring the story to a reasonable end.
And there will be casualties, obviously, in a ground war, but would Israel be terribly distressed now if the Allied forces went in to try to take apart that army?
Let me tell you one thing. I believe that this campaign was conducted brilliantly. Never in the history of wars was there any war that lasted for 5 weeks, 600,000 soldiers, 3,000 planes and helicopters, 1,000 tanks, and so on, practically with as little as one can imagine casualties. I am sure that the second part will also be in the same manner, in the same way as the first part, namely with as little casualties as one can hope for.
37 Scud missiles at Israel. Will your country retaliate? And if there's no ceasefire, if there is a ceasefire, are you going to retaliate soon?
Look, the person who has tried to invite us to participate in the coalition is Mr. Saddam Hussein, and we didn't accept his invitation. The United States and other members has asked us to keep out, which we did, because we understand the reasons for. It's not a matter of retaliation. It's a matter of conducting a very complicated campaign in which Israel has had to pay her role, and we did. Surely, if something dramatic will happen, we shall have to reconsider our position.
Shimon Peres, thank you very much. The leader of Israel's opposition party, the Labor Party, who was here with us, and the rest of Israel went through another Scud missile attack by Iraq within the last half hour. And there were no injuries in that assault. Richard Roth, CNN, reporting live from Tel Aviv.
Thank you, Richard. It is 23 minutes past President Bush's deadline for Iraq to pull out of Kuwait. And our live coverage of it all will continue after this.
I've been working for Calumet Farm, soon be 49 years. I've worked for some famous horses.
What gives a certain group of people the ability to consistently do the impossible? Take Calumet Farm. No other farm has ever dominated horse racing like Calumet. Whirlaway, Citation, Aladar. It would take a winner's circle as big as Kentucky to do justice to this amazing stable. When excellence becomes a tradition, there's no end to the greatness. And it doesn't happen only in horse racing. In the auto industry, Ford Motor Company has continually been a leader in innovation, and there's much more to come. Our new modular V8 represents a dramatic improvement in both efficiency and performance. And our new Crown Victoria and Grand Marquis are redefining the concept of luxury ride and handling. America fell in love with Ford in the 80s. And smart money will tell you, we're going to be even tougher to beat in the 90s. Ford Motor Company.
For years, I never even thought about it. Guess I just didn't want to face things. Yeah, I've been there. But now, my parents, they need real help. It's gonna be tight. We'll just have to manage somehow.
I got this guy at Payne Weber. Put me in a mutual fund for my parents. The same time he set up my kid's college fund.
That long ago? How do you know about your parents back then?
He asked.
Here in Jupiter, a beef stir-fry takes less than 5 minutes and a steak takes less than 10. The people of Jupiter call this weightlessness. Beef, real food in Jupiter, Florida.
With peace proposals on the table, Mideast journalists report how their country and countrymen react to the news. That for them is a matter of life and death. A live special when the press goes to war. Tonight, 6:30 Eastern on CNN.
Now, nearly a half hour past the deadline, we are getting some word of movement at the United Nations in New York at this moment. Frank Sesno is standing by at the White House. Frank, what can you tell us?
Well, what word we're getting from the United Nations comes from our correspondent there, Charles Feldman, who reports that a couple of foreign missions there have told him that the Iraqis are accepting the U.S. statement, but that the UN ambassador, Mr. Pickering, is seeking clarification as to just exactly what the statement is and who it is in the Iraqi leadership who may be accepting this whole thing. Here at the White House, this is, of course, being watched very closely indeed, but White House spokesman Marlin Fitzwater says that there will be no comment on these various reports and somehow conflicting reports from the United Nations at this time. He does, however, plan some sort of response later in the day. President Bush is at Camp David today. He is there with Secretary of State James Baker. They have been very active over the past 2 days, talking with coalition leaders and the Soviets, monitoring these fast-changing developments. Here at the White House, the man in charge is National Security Advisor Brent Scowcroft, who is monitoring the situation closely from here. Dave?
All right, Frank, thank you very much. For more on what is happening at the United Nations, we go now to Charles Feldman in New York. Charles.
Yes, and as you could well imagine, we're getting all kinds of conflicting things here, but let me tell you again what we've been reporting and what we keep hearing, which is that we have now heard from 5 different representatives of 5 different missions, actually one secondhand, 4 direct, that the Iraqi foreign minister has apparently said something that leads everyone in the Security Council to believe that there's a possible acceptance of an American statement, is the way it's being phrased. Unknown, unclear at this time if what we're talking about is President Bush's noon ultimatum for Iraq to begin its pullout from Kuwait. Now, I could tell you that the attaché from one mission here, speaking on condition that we do not name him, says that, in fact, at the Security Council meeting, which is ongoing, I should add, a statement was made by the Soviets that could be perceived as a positive response from the Iraqi foreign minister, again, this operative phrase, to the American statement. Unclear, but we are told that the ambassador to the United Nations, Ambassador Pickering, has asked for a clarification on exactly what is meant. Now, I hasten to add this. About 15 or 20 minutes ago, after our first reports, the official spokesperson for the United Nations came out and said that these reports were incorrect, but would not say what was incorrect about them. We are efforting to find out. Charles Feldman, CNN, reporting live from the UN.
All right, CNN's Charles Feldman reporting for us live from the United Nations. We are continuing to monitor these swiftly moving developments. Stay with CNN. We'll be back.
This is CNN.
CNN's coverage of the war in the Gulf continues. I'm Dave Michaels.
Hello, everyone. I'm Molly McCoy. An hour now has passed since the deadline passed, but no sign that Baghdad's troops are backing down, and no sign that the Allies are letting up their assault. The air bombardment of Baghdad intensified as the noon deadline approached and then slipped by. U.S. ground forces await orders from the White House, orders that may now be inevitable to launch an all-out offensive. Iraq continued its missile offensive on Israel today, firing a Scud at central Israel only minutes before that noon deadline. And U.S. officials report executions by Iraqi soldiers in the streets of Kuwait. Despite the passage of the White House deadline, diplomatic efforts to stop the fighting are far from dead. And there is late word from the United Nations that Iraqi Foreign Minister Tariq Aziz, in practice, has offered a positive response to a U.S. proposal. It is unclear if that means Iraq is accepting it.
We're going to Ralph Begleiter at State Department right now. And Ralph, we understand you have some new information.
Well, there's a flurry of interest in a statement made by the Soviet ambassador to the United Nations, Yuri Vorontsov. He apparently told the UN Security Council during that closed-door session in New York that today Tariq Aziz said that in practice he responded positively to the U.S. proposal. It was a remark on which many of the members of the UN Security Council seized and apparently subsequently asked for more information from the Soviet ambassador. Sources say the Soviet ambassador promised to check with Moscow. U.S. officials are also checking with Moscow at this point to see whether Aziz made any such statement, and if so, to whom he made it. There was a telephone conversation apparently between Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev and the Iraqi foreign minister Tariq Aziz before Aziz boarded his plane for Baghdad. We don't know very much about that phone conversation. A Soviet spokesman, a Kremlin spokesman this morning said Gorbachev effectively urged Baghdad to take seriously the moves it was about to engage in, to consider seriously, weigh seriously all of the diplomatic proposals. We now understand that an Iraqi diplomat was sitting in the UN Security Council chamber at the time the Soviet ambassador made the statement, and at the time others, including the American ambassador Thomas Pickering, were requesting clarification. According to U.S. sources, the Iraqi diplomat did not say anything, did not inject at all any point of clarification or offer to help try to clarify the apparent statement by Tariq Aziz. At this point, U.S. officials remind us that the United States, President Bush has said that if Iraq wants to comply, it must make its compliance known in a public and authoritative way to the United Nations. In other words, not through any third parties, not speaking from someone who does not have the authority to speak for Saddam Hussein, but has to do so in a public and authoritative way. For the moment, that has not occurred, and as we've been reporting, there's been no indication on the ground of any Iraqi withdrawal. Ralph Begleiter, CNN, reporting live from the State Department.
Thank you, Ralph. We're going to the United Nations once again, and Charles Feldman is standing by there. Charles.
Yes, Ralph, the Security Council is still meeting behind closed doors. Let me shed a little light, very little light, on what Ralph Begleiter was reporting about the presence of an Iraqi diplomatic official inside. That was, we believe, the number 2 man at the UN mission, the Iraqi UN mission here in New York. That's because Iraq's ambassador to the United Nations left for Moscow a couple of days back, and it's unclear whether he is still there or is in transit either back to the United States or elsewhere. It is not uncommon, however, for someone from the Iraqi delegation, the ambassador or someone else, during these ongoing discussions that we've had over the past several months, actually, of the Security Council, to be present to hear what the Security Council was talking about. As to why the Iraqi official...
Possibly more violent situation. Kerosene lamps were quickly being put together and just as quickly sold to eager customers. The destruction of the city's 2 power plants has left the capital without lights or running water for nearly 5 weeks. The prospect of a more violent phase of the war brought foreboding to some we met.
I'm really scared from the war, and I want it to stop.
We don't want this war, and we want to stop it, and we want to see our children to live ordinary life like other people, not scared every night without water, without electricity, without medicine.
The night scenes were spectacular from the front door of the Al Rashid Hotel and from the satellite uplink tent of CNN, from where coverage of the Baghdad end of the next phase of the war, should it happen, will be transmitted. Peter Arnett, CNN, Baghdad.
Once again, we remind you that reports from Baghdad are monitored by Iraqi officials.
And now for a view from another part of the Persian Gulf region, we go live now to Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, and Mike Chenoy. Mike.
Dave, it's the middle of the night here in Saudi Arabia, and we're all waiting for more information about what's been going on the battlefield. The U.S. Central Command here has had nothing to say since the deadline expired, except that Operation Desert Storm is proceeding according to schedule. The expectation here is that it may be several hours or even a day or two before the full-scale land assault gets underway. Meanwhile, there was a discernible sigh of relief from many in Saudi Arabia at the news that the deadline passed without Saddam Hussein announcing he was going to pull out of Kuwait, and thus forcing the Allies, in all probability, to start an all-out ground assault. The reason, a growing sentiment here in this country and in the other Arab members of the coalition, that they will not be secure unless Saddam Hussein and his Ba'ath Party loyalists are toppled from power. That view was forcefully expressed to me a short while ago by Abdullah Dabag. He's the influential head of Saudi Arabia's Chamber of Commerce.
I believe that whether he has a strong army or a weak army, as long as the man is there, he is a menace and a threat. I believe that we can live with a strong Iraq without Saddam easily, with a strong but rational and moral Iraq. And that's the only way you can have that is without Saddam or his apparatchik, his both political or military apparatchik, his goons, as I call them.
There is still hope that Saddam's people or his army may take matters into their own hands and get rid of their leader. But otherwise, the expectation here is that the Allied forces will do the job. Mike Chenoy, CNN, reporting live from Riyadh, Saudi Arabia.
When we continue, more coverage of the war in the Gulf.
Iraq has lost this chance and to make use of this goodwill, and it's not only these days but over the months this opportunity, this possibility was available.
Nevertheless, Ignatyenko said Gorbachev had issued a last-minute appeal for President Bush to extend the deadline for Iraq to withdraw from Kuwait. Iraqi Foreign Minister Tariq Aziz had left town expressing a willingness to go along with the Soviet-brokered six-point plan that Washington had already dismissed virtually out of hand.
I here tell you that the Iraqi government fully endorses this plan and fully supports it.
That said, Aziz flew for home, leaving behind unsubstantiated rumors that he had expressed a willingness to actually accept the White House ultimatum. The final day of Moscow diplomacy began with Aziz meeting with Soviet Foreign Minister Alexander Besmertlik and Presidential Envoy Yevgeny Primakov. The Soviets reportedly were still trying to soften the Iraqi position. Those attempts failed. By the end of the day, Ignatyenko confirmed Besmertlik had failed, but the Soviet spokesman implied that he thought the beginning of a ground war might succeed where diplomacy had failed.
I think that the attitude of Iraq towards the ultimatum will be changing.
Soviet frustration with old ally Iraq was reaching the level of Washington's. The Kremlin stopped short of saying it was washing its hands of the stubborn Baghdad, but did say it was now standing back and wouldn't let whatever happened next, even a ground war, harm relations with the United States. Steve Hurst, CNN, Moscow.
We'll have more after this.
CNN Headline News. I'm Valerie Hoff.
Day 38 of the Gulf War sees feverish diplomatic activity, but no solution to end the threat of a ground war that looms ever larger by the hour. Here's a quick rundown of today's developments. A senior Pentagon official announces U.S. forces have permission to go ahead with a ground assault against Iraq. The official says the authorization has been in effect for some time and is not, in effect, a new instruction. The Allied coalition deadline also passes without Iraqi troops pulling out of Kuwait. A vice chairman of Baghdad's Revolutionary Command Council says Iraq will not comply with the U.S. ultimatum. And diplomatic efforts to halt the fighting and resolve the conflict moved to the United Nations Security Council. A senior Bush administration official says a ground war could begin at any time. At today's briefing, a Pentagon spokesman refused comment on reports U.S. Forces Commander General Norman Schwarzkopf has already received the green light for the land battle. But he did say Operation Desert Storm has reached a turning point with the expiration of today's Allied deadline. The Pentagon did make it clear during today's briefing that the world will know when the ground war does start.
As General Schwarzkopf said a couple of weeks ago when he indicated the best was yet to come, a considerable additional amount of violence is available to the commander should it be decided to use that violence. And that's what they will see. And as I said a couple of times, if the ground attack occurs, there will be no doubt in anybody's mind, and especially in the minds of the Iraqi soldiers, that it has occurred.
The United Nations Security Council is meeting again tonight to try to come up with a peace proposal to end the Gulf War. During a meeting earlier today, the Council unsuccessfully tried to merge a Soviet peace plan with a U.S. proposal. Kuwait's ambassador to the UN says any peace proposal must include Iraq accepting all UN resolutions.
I wish that I see something in writing from Iraqi government. Dealing with the Iraqis have been proven that you should not trust them unless they write to the Secretary General. And even that, maybe it will be with doubt, but nevertheless, once they write to the Secretary General to accept Security Council resolution, that's the only moment where we believe them.
Soviet spokesman Vitaly Ignatenko says he believes Baghdad's position on Allied demands for ending the war may be changing. His statement came after Iraqi Foreign Minister Tariq Aziz announced his country's acceptance of the latest Soviet plan for ending the war. Aziz later left Moscow for Baghdad. Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak issued a fresh appeal to Saddam Hussein today.
I can't give you any official sort of word on that. All I can say is that, repeat the kind of things that have been said over the last few days, and that is that people here, as you've heard us report, a lot of people here have said they believe that the Allies have more than Kuwait on their mind and they want the destruction of this country. That's what the people here say. Now, whether they think that there's going to be a massive invasion into Iraq, that's what they're saying, is that they think it may or may not happen.
And the simple fear of ordinary people, is that increasing, or is it business as usual and the dreary and horrible business of war goes on?
That sort of feeling was increasing over the last few days, particularly, we were on a really sort of seesaw balance here. Would the ultimatum, would the deadline pass without a response? Would Iraq's acceptance of what amounts to a surrender, Iraq's acceptance of an unconditional withdrawal according to the Soviet peace proposal, would that be accepted? I think people were feeling the more they gave and the more it was rejected, people were feeling that the Allies wanted a war, wanted a ground attack, wanted to see the destruction of Iraq no matter what. That, as I say, is the feeling from people here.
Do they feel isolated? Do they feel that countries such as Jordan make it, the support of Jordan make it more or less an even battle, or does it look to them like one country against the world?
I think it looks like to them as one country against the world. They have repeatedly said to us on the streets in the last few days that whatever happens, it will be a victory for Iraq, because what they say is that they have stood up to, as they put it, they've stood up to a coalition of about 30 forces, 30 nations arrayed against them. They say that by simply standing up and getting through it this far, by withstanding and not buckling, that they've already won at least a sort of moral victory. That's what the people we've been talking to have said here. Obviously, we don't talk to everybody. We We talk to a sort of handful of people every day, and that's the kind of thing we're being told.
Well, as you can imagine, it certainly seems President Bush's strategy, the strategy of the coalition, is to humiliate Saddam Hussein, make it so that there is no possible way he could claim a victory from whatever the result of the land battle is. It seems from what you're saying, though, that in the eyes of his own people, no matter what happens, he will have achieved some kind of victory.
Well, I can't tell you what they're going to say today or in the next few days once information about the ground war comes in. But over the last few days, they've been saying that no matter what happens, at that point they expected, or they were thinking, that Iraq might withdraw. They were saying no matter what happens, the fact that we've stood up so far, for us at least, is some kind of a victory.
CNN's Christian Amanpour reporting to us live from Baghdad. Thanks very much for that. Our special coverage of the war in the Gulf and this latest phase continues after this.
This month, watch for your Discover Card application. It means you're already approved. Approved for the card that pays you cash back, yet charges you no annual fee. So just sign it and return to sender. It pays to Discover.
Felix Popo. Upon graduation from Escoffier, some of these culinary masters go to London or Rome. André Legault. Others go to sea and work their magic on Norwegian Cruise Line. No cruise line caters to food the way we do. The pleasure ship.
In the distance, however, that's the first sign of any activity we've had over the last few hours. The last thing we did have here was on the dot of 8 o'clock, the deadline, 8 p.m. local time, the deadline set by the United States and the Allies. We did have a huge fireball, several bombs dropping over this area, but that was the latest. As for information today, Baghdad is very quiet. There has been nothing in the local press, obviously, and nothing on Baghdad radio. The only thing that we're getting on Baghdad radio is the Quran, prayers being said and parts of the Quran being read. So the people here, unless they're listening to international broadcasts and shortwave radio, have not yet woken up to the fact that the war has apparently gone into its next phase. It is quiet over here. The last thing we heard from President Saddam Hussein was that he was chairing a meeting of the Revolutionary Command Council yesterday to discuss the latest developments in the Gulf. The last thing we heard in terms of political response last night was from the vice chairman of the Revolutionary Command Council, who was fairly defiant, who basically rejected the United States ultimatum, saying that although Iraq wanted peace, the ultimatum was not realistic militarily and that they couldn't accept it. That is the latest from here. So far, it's very quiet. We've not yet had a chance to go out on the streets. We will be doing so soon to talk to people, find out what their feelings are. As I say, no sign of any military activity from Baghdad, and we're not allowed to go anywhere near lines or supply routes or anything else, so I can't tell you what kind of activity is going on near the front.
More than 4 hours after the Allies launched a ground offensive, Iraq now says its army would bring disgrace and destruction to President Bush and U.S. troops. In its first word on the ground,